are continuing our Forever International Creative Book Club on the book The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Today, I'll be summarizing and commenting on the section between pages 335 and page 352. So, the first mini chapter here is called Clean Slate. And here what Rick Rubin says is that when we get too close to our work, we can lose perspective. We can lose a way to judge it and hear it for what it really needs. Has that ever happened to you where you've just been looking at it so much, you just can't even consider what you even like about it or what could change? You start to almost lose touch with your relationship to the work or your ability to keep going with it. So that closeness, he says, happens to almost all artists eventually. They find themselves too close to the piece, perspective is lost, and he says you develop a kind of blindness. And this causes more doubt and distortion than is really merited, and you can go in circles. And he says that one idea to help you with this is to take time away from your project. Maybe this weekend, don't work on it at all. Maybe don't talk about it at all. Maybe take longer if you need. Get some breathing room from your work. He says that this will help view the artwork as a first-time viewer, closer to them. And the goal, he says, is to be in the present moment with the work. When we make edits, he says, we don't often see the big picture. So there was an interesting part where he said that often you might make a list of edits to your creative work, and then once you apply them, you don't then take a step back to see if the edit really made it better or not. You often go, okay, that was my idea to make the edit is made, moving on. And sometimes he says your ego can get in the way, and your ego thought this would make it better, so sometimes it hangs on to that change instead of being like that first-time viewer with distance and more objectivity. So his advice with that is to give the list of edits, if possible, to an outsider who can apply them, and then you throw the edits away in terms of you don't go back and check that the edits are done. You look at the whole piece as a whole to see if you like it now. He says that another way to keep this clean slate attitude is to avoid looking at the work too often. He also says you can use meditation, which I'm such a big fan of, and I know he is as well, throughout the book for different parts of your creative process. And other ideas he gives, which I'm totally in agreement with, are vigorous exercise, a scenic adventure, or an unrelated creative activity. So in the comments below, let me know how you're going to add some clean slate energy to your creative project. Are you going to do any of the ones mentioned here? Okay, the next mini chapter is called Context. This one was really fun to read. It's on page 339 because it reminded me of those books for kids where they're teaching them opposites and they're like up, down, black, white, day, night, etc. Because he even put a list on 341 of all the contrasting elements you can play with to give yourself more flavors in your creative work. The way he starts off this mini chapter is saying, and I loved this metaphor, he said, take a flower out of a field and put it in the barrel of a gun, and then put it in the hand of someone in a painting, or he said, place it on a gravestone. And he said, notice how the significance changes. The context of where you put that flower against what backdrop, be it on the gravestone or in the barrel of the gun, totally change what you're saying and how that flower looks in relation to its new surroundings. So he says, in new surroundings, the same object can take on considerably different meanings. The context changes the content. The context, that's a tongue twister, changes the content. And so he asks us to consider the implications of this principle in our own work. For example, he says to place, like even the frame or of an art piece, or the background color, or how you sequence the songs in an album, one against the other. It'll really make one song sound differently depending on which one comes before and after it. He also says other forms of context to consider are the social norms of the time, when you publish and when you share and where you share your art totally change how it looks, feels. I mean, some people could argue with this though, being the one who's reading this as an interpreter. I would say there is some art that some people believe that no matter against what backdrop, it has a similar effect. So let's leave the door open for that. He says that if you're ever feeling, well, I'm saying if you're ever feeling stuck, he says that if a work is not living up to your expectations, consider changing the context. So switch it up, freshen it up, look past the principal element, examine the variables around it, play with different combinations, place it next to other works, surprise yourself. I'll read you the contrasting pairs he shared with us. Some common options he says are soft, loud, fast, slow, high, low, close, far, bright, dark, large, small, curved, straight, rough, smooth, before, after, inside, outside, same, different. A new context may create a work more powerful than the one you anticipated, one you never could have imagined before changing one seemingly inconsequential element. So if you're ever feeling dull, stuck, repetitive, consider changing the context. For example, to bring it to something tangible, me making these videos with and for all of you, if I change the background, or if I change what I'm wearing, or if I change, like if I have music in the background, or even how I edit this, that would be changing the context. What is this placed against? Or what is, like even the lighting right now. I can change so many things in this one video in terms of the context. And even the fact that this video is within a multi-part series for this book club, that's context. If I had just one day decided to read you these 4 few pages or these 15 pages without the whole book and all these other videos in the series, that would probably feel and transmit very differently. Okay, the next mini chapter is on page 343, and it's called The Energy, parentheses, in the Work, parentheses. This is where it gets a little more abstract, and I love when he gives us more practical mini chapters and then contrast them with these more energetic spiritual ones. So here he says that what drives us and what motivates us to keep going on a project, on a creative project, is the energy in the work. We would like to think that it's our own enthusiasm, he says, a feeling that wells up when in the throes of self-expression. But this energy is not generated by us. We are caught by it. We picked it up from the work. It contains the charge, a contagious vitality that pulls us forward. So, works hinting at greatness contain a charge we can feel, like static before a lightning storm. Has anyone felt that? I felt it today with like a breeze. There was a breeze and I knew that it meant there might be a storm tonight. So sometimes there's a pre-feeling to greatness. I love that metaphor. If that's on page 343. I love when he says, works hinting at greatness contain a charge we can feel, like static before a lightning storm. They consume their maker, occupying waking thoughts and dreams. Sometimes they become the artist's reason for living. So later he says, this was a really powerful part. He says he compares this energy to another force of creation in the world, in his words, love. And his definition of love was so empowering. No, it was endearing. It was beautiful. And before I read it, comment below, how would you define love? Because for him to even define it in one sentence, which is what he does here, is a feat. And kudos to Rick Rubin. So before I read it, pause this video, comment below, how would you define love in one sentence? I am so curious. Let's make this a poetry activity internationally amongst creatives, and you don't even have to be a writer or a poet to contribute to this activity. How would you define love? He says, a kinetic draw beyond our rational comprehension. A kinetic draw beyond our rational comprehension. So cool. So for the rest of the chapter, he talks about how it's like a dance between you and the work, because you need to be using that energy well for it to, in a way, keep giving you that energy, and for there to be like a feedback loop, like a circuit. So he says that even though the energy can be coming to you, if you don't use it well, it can be lost or dissipated. As you experiment and craft, more energetic charges are set off as further decisions are made. You catch yourself losing track of time, forgetting to eat, withdrawing from the outside world. Other times the process is a grind, minutes pass slowly. Remember that the energy in the work isn't always accessible to you. At times you take a wrong turn and the charge is lost. If the work is thrilling one day and isn't for a long time after, you may have experienced a false indicator. When the moments of joy seem like a distant memory and the work feels like an obligation to a past idea, this can mean you've either gone too far or that particular seed wasn't actually ready to germinate. So he gives us a few options in the rest of this, a few cases to explain why there might be a different rhythm or path to that energetic charge. All living things are interconnected, depending on one another to survive. This was really key. This is what I was getting at before about that feedback loop. A work of art is no different. It generates excitement in you. This commands your attention, and your attention is exactly what's required for it to grow. It's a harmonic, mutually dependent relationship. The creator and the creation rely on each other to thrive. Where there's excitement, there's energy, and where there's energy, there's light. So are you giving attention to your creative work? Because that's the feedback loop. It gives you energy, you give it attention. The best work is the work you are excited about. Okay, the last mini chapter in this section is called Ending to Start Anew. Regeneration. I'm going to read you the part that I highlighted. The gist of this mini chapter to me was about the concept of starting, continuing, finishing a work, to then start, continue, and finish another. So this concept to not hold on to one project for too long and put all your eggs in that basket and think, oh, this is my life's work. Because when you think that's your life's work, you might not finish it, or you might wait so long to finish it because you're scared, as we've talked about earlier in the book, that future works won't come. But if you trust the regenerative aspect, then you're going to be enjoying more works and more of the cycle. He says, like, he has this, I think he said it here, that our bodies, decay to go back into the earth, which gives the earth new nutrients in life. Has anyone here done compost? I was mixing compost a lot in 2020. And I love mixing compost. It was fascinating and so symbolic, because all the organic matter you put in there, as solid as it seems, within a few days, it decomposes and it becomes this really hot and steamy and nutrient-rich soil that goes right back into your next seeds and crops and all that. So I've seen it before my eyes, how much life can decay into life. And he says that art exists. It's hard to say exists. Is it hard for you to say exists? Art exists in the same cycle of death and rebirth. We participate in this by completing one project so that we can start anew. For any of you chronic procrastinators, take note of this mini chapter, Ending to Start Anew. It's called Regeneration, because then we can fall in love with the finishing, knowing it gives life to the next. As in life, each ending invites a fresh beginning. When consumed with a single work to the degree that we believe it's our life's mission, there is no room for the next one to develop. That's what I was highlighting before. And he said, while the artist's goal is greatness, it's also to move forward. So comment below, what project are you holding on to for maybe longer than you need to? And more than that, what project would you do next once this one is finished? I want to see that cycle. I want to hear you map out that cycle of finishing and regenerating. Sharing art is the price of making art. exposing your vulnerability is the feat. So any of you who are avoiding finishing your work because you'll be seen, it'll be time to share it. I know I just shared my flower card deck. It's a motivational daily guidance deck. And sure, I think there is a lot people could disagree with or not understand. Not a lot, but there's going to be feedback. And yet right now, I feel so much more relaxed about that than when I was overthinking it in the middle of the process. So there, my hope for you, my feedback is that it's not as scary once it's really being shared. At least that's how it's been for me. I'll end this by saying, every artist creates a dynamic history, a living museum of finished objects, one work after another, begun, completed, released, over and over again. Each a timestamp, commemorating a moment of passage, a moment filled with energy, now forever embodied in a work of art. A work of art is not an endpoint in itself, it's a station on a journey, a chapter in our lives. We acknowledge these transitions by documenting each of them. I heard him say that earlier too. It's a chapter, it's a snapshot. So let it be a moment. Don't try to let this one work of art summarize your whole life, because I know that's what I was doing for a while with a few of my works. Remember that you haven't had the same exact body or face or height your whole life. You haven't had the same exact likes and dislikes. You probably haven't lived in the same exact place your whole life. I mean, there's so much that has changed. And so let this work of art that you currently have in your heart or that you're currently working on, let it be a representation of this moment and allow it to then go into the earth and go out into the world so you can make space for the new work of art. There's our rainbow, and if you haven't bought your hard copy, there's nothing quite like having your hard copy to write in the sides, to highlight, to put post-its on. Of course, I'm all for digital or audiobooks or library books. Simply sharing that if you do want to get it, it's the kind of book I recommend because you will probably want to reread it. Okay, this was fun. See you soon. We're almost done with this book club, and I'd love to hear in the comments below what book you want me to do next.